You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie. National speaker Timmerie Millington has been a passionate advocate for life as long as she can remember, helping Gen X through Z answer the call to true feminism and authentic manhood. Chris Mueller is a national speaker, author, father of 6, and is currently making a Catholic TV show for families as he travels speaking to over 10,000 people each year. Between Chris having over 18 years experience in Catholic lay ministry and Timmerie's holding a master's degree in biblical theology, together they cover the week's hottest stories from a Catholic worldview. You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie.
So I have this problem, and it is that I do not have a good singing voice when it comes to church. And there was this article that came out this week, Chris, specifically talking about those moments when there's a terrible singer next to you.
Yeah, okay, so the terrible singer problem I have found not to be as, more often than not, I will be sitting next to the person who just really sings, but they may have like training so that it's like going for it. and maybe I've been guilty of being that person at times too. But yeah.
Are you saying you can sing really well?
I've taken the voice lessons in the past. Once upon a time, I could sing really well. Yes.
Yeah, I do not have any skills when it comes to singing. Actually, funny story, I was with a priest friend of mine a number of years ago, and we were chanting The Office. And, I know I can't sing, and so chanting The Office is difficult, especially when you're doing it 6 times a day at that period in my life.
All right, back up a second, because there are some people who are maybe not familiar with The Office, and they're thinking you're chanting episodes of the sitcom The Office, which would be fantastic, and I'd love to watch. But what are you talking about?
Good point. The Office is the prayer of the church, the prayer that all of the priests, the popes pray, the same exact prayer today, and a number of the laity and also religious sisters will also pray it. And it's a prayer, actually 7 times a day. It used to be 7 times a day, praising the Lord. And so you have morning prayer, afternoon prayer, evening prayer, and it's based off of the Psalms. It's very beautiful. It goes from kind of the Old Testament feeling in the morning, and you transition at one point during the day into the New Testament,
all right,
the coming of Christ.
Now, if I was referring to this as the Liturgy of the Hours, would that then be correct?
Same thing.
All right, so if you're thinking, wait, that's Liturgy of the Hours, it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just another phrase to call this awesome prayer that we have as a gift from the church. But long story short, I'm sitting there chanting The Office, and the priest next to me is like taking his hand higher and higher and higher. And I'm thinking, what the heck does he want? Like, man, Father, does he really want me to sing louder? And I'm like trying to not sing louder, and he keeps like waving at me. And afterward, I go, Father, why for the last couple of days during evening prayer were you asking me to sing louder? And he goes, I wasn't asking you to sing louder. I was encouraging you to find the right note.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah, it's interesting, the singing badly in church conundrum, right? I've heard, it's kind of a thing that speakers will say, like, well, if you sing badly, well, God gave you the voice, so give it back to him, right? And, there's some truth to that. I think our problem in church is less people singing badly and more people just not singing at all.
I think that is a problem. That's where I struggle. I want to sing. I want to pray. I want to participate. My family, especially mom, always said, sing loud and proud, like enjoy praising our Lord. But I have a wretched voice when it comes to singing. That's just the way it is. And she loves it. My family gets a good kick out of it, especially if I end up singing loud or if I get annoyed when, daily mass, they're attempting to sing a song and they really don't have it. And I'm trying to keep singing, but maybe I'm like one of the few people actually still singing. Right. Someone's like, were you trying to lead that? No, I was just trying to participate.
Yeah, we've had this kind of, amazing experience where we've been at Mass in our local parish, St. Martha's, and we sit towards the front because we have kids and we like to entertain the other side of the church. And there'll be young men standing behind us who've come through the youth ministry. They sit together in a group and they'll be singing full voice. And none of them has an incredible voice. In fact, I would say some of them have, downright terrible voices. But when they're all singing together, it's just so beautiful to hear and it kind of, I think it inspires the rest of the area that we sit in to kind of join in and to enter into that worship that way. So I would say, man, if you got a bad voice, if you're sitting next to someone and you're thinking, wow, their voice is distractingly bad, we'll sing louder so that you can't hear them. You know what I mean? That's, I think if we're all singing badly together, there's a beauty in that.
And if you sing distractingly bad, maybe you shouldn't be the one singing in the choir, which I did have an experience of that this weekend. I was out of town traveling and I was dying, Chris. One of the guys singing in, it was a Life Teen choir, but I will say the people were definitely pushing past 50 at least in the Life Teen choir. And the guy was like on top of the mic the whole time singing. oh my gosh, back up for a second.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. It's interesting that there's a book on revitalizing parishes called Rebuilt, and it's one of the things that they talk about in that book is finding people's giftedness. And so if you have someone who can't read, then they maybe shouldn't be a lector, right? Or if you have someone who sings, don't give them the mic. And in church, I think sometimes we want to hurt people's feelings. And so everybody can serve in every ministry. And sometimes you have to say, no, we really deserve, the liturgy deserves excellence, right? And so while we can raise people up and we can give training to people, if someone really just doesn't have a giftedness in an area, why are we then subjecting everyone else to it?
This is totally off topic, but isn't this the theme of today? People always say, well, you can do anything. You're good at anything. But the reality is sometimes you do not have a gift in a certain area.
Yeah, I've accepted math is just not part of my giftedness. That's why I married a very intelligent woman who can do math. It was on my list of things I was looking for. Math abilities.
That is definitely helpful.
It's paid off.
Especially with finances.
And children, yes.
And children, counting how many there are still.
Yeah, well, and when you have a 13-year-old who's in math that I was taking as a senior in high school, and I'm going, well, Dad, can you help me? And I tried the other day, and it was where's your mother?
Did it end in a fight?
No, it just ended in me going, you probably have to wait for your mom to be done doing what she's doing over there.
Well, we have a lot planned for the show today. That's Chris Mueller. I'm Timmerie Millington. If you were just listening to us, this is Trending. So today we're talking a lot about health and fitness. It's kind of a unique show. You get to know us, I think, a little bit better and what's going on in our lives. So first segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about discipline, restlessness. Later on, we'll be talking about exercise, a little bit about how to eat, and just recognizing that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, which is why we're talking about prayer when we're talking about health as well.
Yeah, I love the physical spiritual connection. I mean, we have to kind of emphasize the fact that human beings are physical and spiritual. We're the only point in creation where that intersects. And so your physical health is going to affect your spiritual well-being. It's just part of the deal, And so, yeah, I love it. And I think there's something that the church has taught throughout the centuries, that physical actions can help your spiritual growth. Fasting is a great example of that, right? Mm-hmm. It's a discipline you can enter into. It's become a real big health trend right now. The church has been teaching it forever because denying yourself in small things can teach you to deny yourself when temptation comes, right? And it's a training we've kind of lost. And so I'm excited to talk about this stuff today.
And we'll be talking about fasting a little bit more later on, but there are some major health benefits to it, in addition to totally giving you the opportunity to grow in Christian virtue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to talk, kind of kicking off here, about restlessness, because I think that this ties into the whole area of health and fitness, where we discuss discipline. And if we're not disciplined in our lives, we are going to end up being restless.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, discipline is such a dirty word right now. But to be disciplined is to be a disciple. It's the same root. And so when you would follow someone, you would follow their discipline, right? And so, yeah, restlessness and productivity. And we're going to be citing an article from Art of Manliness. And if you haven't checked it out, it's a great podcast. A lot of really interesting stuff comes up there. But the point they make in the article is, if you want to get stuff done, work when you work, right? Mm-hmm. And don't do your recess activities in the middle of your work. It's distracting. It goes completely with what we know about how the brain focuses and how we as human beings don't multitask. We task switch. And when you task switch, it takes you off what you're doing. It takes like 12 minutes to refocus on what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in the middle of doing a spreadsheet and then you just check social media, it's going to take you 12 minutes to get as focused as you were before you left your spreadsheet.
Well, and I feel like so many people are like, man, women are superheroes. They can multitask. They can do everything at once. No, even women who may be able to accomplish a lot, right, are not able to multitask at the level people think. I remember growing up, people like, oh, well, you're a girl. You can multitask really well. And that's actually a really bad attitude to have, to think, oh, yeah, I can totally watch TV, this TV show I've never seen before, that I'm going to talk about on the show while I'm also writing an article for somewhere else. Like, it doesn't work. No matter how hard you try, you're distracted. And then let's say at the same time you want to be visiting with a friend who's come over to hang out. You're going to do all of those things poorly.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, that term multitasking is actually a term that we've taken from the world of computers and applied to human beings. It didn't exist before computers. And we've kind of decided we're this machine. We don't multitask. We task switch. There's a great book on this called The Distracted Mind. And I was actually listening to this book in my car when I was hit from behind by someone who was looking at his phone, right? Oh. Total emphasis of distracted mind. But like we we just don't do that well as a species. And what we have as a culture is everyone is distracted all the time because we're constantly being sucked out of our present moment into what's going on our cell phones, our smartphones, whether that be social media or a text message or whatever it is. And so, yeah, the author of this article is really saying, and they recommend this method called the Pomodoro method, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know where the name came from.
I love it. I've been following this method since I was in college, and it really helped me when I needed to write, because I feel like anytime I needed to sit down to write, anything else that could come up would come up.
Right.
And even just that little buzz of the phone would be a distraction. Who could it be? And so actually, I'm just going to throw out there a huge kind of thing that helps me is sometimes it's good to turn off your phone and set it aside.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother thing. That being said, this Pomodoro method is basically you have about 25 to 30 minutes where you're working, and then you take, say, a 3 to 5 minute break. And during that 3 to 5 minute break, you have a list basically of anything that you thought of during your work time, whether it was text so-and-so, order vitamins online, pay this insurance bill.
Right.
You have that on your list, and you can accomplish those things during that downtime or at a different time.
I actually loved that because that was something I actually didn't read this article. I listened to this article on my smartphone as I was driving because I was distracted because I'm dangerous. And but I heard that. I thought that's something so useful because what will happen to me is I'll be writing an article and I'll go, oh, I want to tweet this. Well, write it down in your distraction list, tweet it later, or load it into Hootsuite or some kind of social media scheduler. Or I wonder, do platypus really have poisonous spines on the back of their legs? So you check, because you need to know right now, right? Like that's going to burn in my brain. So write it down in the distraction list. And then get to it later. Well,
and what's great is a lot of the time at the end of like an hour or say the end of the day, you look at that distraction list. There are a bunch of things that you can cross off that really weren't that important, especially like looking up, a wedding dress or whatever it might be online, right? We'll be right back. We're talking more about discipline, exercise, eating, and prayer later on in the show. I was thinking about tying that into the royal wedding. And that's where the wedding dress was coming from.
Right, yeah, I was like, oh, look at that, we're done.
Okay, that's still going to be, we'll just make sure we stop on time.
We landed the plane.
Let's come back in a little bit more with that Pomodoro technique.
Totally.
Okay, let's see. Ready, set, go.
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
So we're talking about the Pomodoro technique. We're talking about discipline, health, fitness. Later on in the show, we'll be talking about prayer and eating as well, and how, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. But this technique, Chris, I think is so helpful. I've been doing it for a number of years, but I've been doing more so the on 33 minutes, off 3 minutes. It was an odd number that would get you a little past that 30-minute mark. And I noticed that when you start to hit that 30-minute mark, you do get a little antsy. If you're not antsy, part of the idea is just keep going until you do need that break then. Or if you're in the middle of something, whether it's, prepping for an article for the show, finish it off. Right, yeah,
and I loved that was mentioned. And because I know for me, when I sit down to write a blog or a post or a script for the Chris Mueller Project, I feel like I don't get seated in it for about 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden everything starts to flow and everything happens, but I have to work through those blocks, right?
Right.
And so to take a 30-minute work period and then rest for 3 minutes would be super disruptive to me. But, take an hour break or say I'm going to work for an hour and really kind of stretch yourself to it and then have that break to look forward to. I mean, I think that's something that can't be discounted, the incentivizing of it. Like, okay, well, if I do this, then I can do a break, for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you set, and there's the keeping your, one of the things I think was important and needs to be mentioned is you have to keep yourself to it, right? Because if you say, well, then I'm just going to watch TV for 15 minutes on my break, well, no TV show is 15 minutes long, right? So you're going to definitely watch a show for longer than 15 minutes. And so you're setting yourself up for failure. So be realistic about those break periods. Like, are you doing things that you can let go of?
And I think it's really important not to just look at the clock and kind of keep an eye on the clock. Instead, I set that timer and I'll set it on my phone. I will put my phone on the other side of the room, sometimes in a drawer, going, I have to work on this. And even having those goals for that period of time, like this is specifically what I'm working on. Everything else has to come later. Because the reality is we are so distracted and distant from nature, distant from just interacting with people on a basis where we're social, right? Like in the workforce, we're meant to be working, but we've kind of transitioned it into, well, are we working or is it work-life experience and how we're there with people around us? It makes it really difficult today to stay focused and be able to differentiate when we're playing, when we're enjoying our time versus when we're working.
Right. And it's so easy to kind of dawdle through your day so that when you get to the end of your day, you still have a list of things you need to get done that you didn't get done, and you weren't productive. So now you're carrying all of that guilt around about it. And so what you end up doing is when you're at home at night with your spouse or your kids, you're half present because you were half present during work, and now you're half present during your family. And the reality is both of those things require your total presence if you're going to do them well.
So essentially, we just sabotage the pleasure reward system within our brain, and not just within our brain, but actually enjoying life. Even just the other night, my sister gave me a call. I had taken some time off of some other work. I was prepping for the show, and my sister calls me in the middle, and she's FaceTiming me. So even more so, you can't get away with holding that phone next to you. And so I just am trying to stop and, just look at her and be present, knowing the pressure. And, sometimes even if you just take that 10 minutes, talk to the family member, talk to the friend, say, I can't stay for long, having that boundary of going, okay, now I've got to get back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's great about this too is you're more productive, you get more done, and so the end result is you have more time. Mm-hmm. Because when you talked to people about why aren't you doing the things you should be doing to keep you healthy, they always say, I don't have time. Right.
Well, and this gets down to one of the fundamental things regarding time today that I think we either make it, I think a lot of time, we do make an excuse about, and that is exercise. I feel like the older you get, the more challenging it is to implement that exercise time in your life. Right.
But I talk to 20-year-olds who are like, well, I just don't have time to exercise. And I'm like, well, yeah, you do. You really do.
I do have to say probably the most difficult period of time for me with exercise thus far in my life at this old age, was actually when I was in college. It was really hard. It was a challenge for me too, because I went from dancing anywhere from 25 to 40 hours a week to not dancing at all in college. And, I remember there were times where it was really difficult on my mood and my focus having that change. And it took me a number of years to re-implement exercise into my life, recognizing that this is something that I need just to stay mentally healthy, not even just physically healthy.
Right. I would actually echo that completely. When I went to college, I'd been involved in athletics in high school. And so you had a coach and you had a team and you had regular practice times. And then it became something that was my responsibility. And so it was very streaky. Like you'd go to the gym for 2 or 3 weeks until everything hurt, and then you'd stop, right?
You didn't mean in college you were streaking to the gym, right?
No, I wasn't streaking to the gym. Although, anyway, no, that didn't happen. But or the other thing is you remember of when you were in training, right? Whether that be dance or athletics or whatever it is you did in those high school years, and you fall out of training, you go to the gym, you think, I'm going to work out the way I used to work out, and then you can't, and you feel defeated, right? And so you just don't go.
Okay, and I do have to say this. I have a couple of friends who have, been in those years where they're trying to re-implement exercise regimens, whether they're, out of college or have a kid now. I have a couple of friends who hardcore overdid it, hit the gym way too hard. They're young. They were kind of able to pull it off. Well, they ended up having some major health issues and ended up in the ER, basically because they worked out so hard. They flooded their body with the intensity of the exercise. Give it 3 or 4 days, they're still in the ER and not able to participate in their family life, work life, because there wasn't this balance and kind of this progressive growth back into exercise.
Right. And so I think that's why something like this, the Pomodoro method, and then kind of moving into exercise, saying, well, I'm going to start by implementing this method in my life with my scheduling, and then I'm going to start getting back into exercise by going for a walk.
Mm-hmm. Right? Absolutely. I think that's a really easy way to start moving again. That is Chris Mueller. I'm Timmerie Millington. We're talking about health and fitness. And, I remember in grad school, so I was working full time and I was going to school full time. Oh my gosh, that was probably one of the most stressful periods of time for me. My health was struggling at the same time. It had been for a while. And I remember I knew I just had to move. So even if it was me standing and walking around my small apartment in circles while I read, or going and hooking myself up to the elliptical at the apartment gym and trying to read as I'm bouncing up and down looking at the words.
I can't do that. I've tried to read on the stationary bike. I've tried to read on the elliptical, and I just can't do it.
Yeah, it can be really difficult. Well, and another thing I would do sometimes where you just need to stop for a minute, I also don't have the discipline to stay on an elliptical. I've always grown up with classes and dancing. So what I do is, okay, if I'm going to take a 45-minute break and I really want to watch a show, well, guess what? I'm going to watch a show while I exercise.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely found that watching, if you struggle with cardiovascular exercise, like whether that be a treadmill or an elliptical or a stationary bike or whatever your poison is, it's something we all love TV. So why not watch while we're doing that exercise? Why not use that time better?
Yeah, force yourself to stay on until that show is over.
Right. And it's amazing how the exercise goes faster.
Well, it's amazing how unlikely you are to hit, let's watch another episode when you're on that machine too.
Well, yeah, I imagine that is true. It's interesting because we know that people in our culture are being prescribed antidepressants at a greater rate than ever before. And part of that is, I think, what we talked about previously, that restlessness and the work situation, all of that. And also it's because I think we just aren't equipping ourselves for happiness in that we don't have the energy we need. And study after study shows that when you incorporate exercise in your life, it can lift your mood. It releases all kinds of fantastic chemicals are going to make you feel better. And so it's like, hey, why don't we just take this rather than, and again, I'm not saying the antidepressants don't have a place, but why not try to deal with your lifestyle? Why not try to deal with getting in and making small changes that are going to affect your total outcome?
Well, isn't that in general, when something's going downhill in our lives, like there's usually a reevaluation that we need to bring in before we make drastic changes. And, just looking at exercise and the hormonal and chemicals in the brain that are released during exercise, those are a lot of the things that antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication are actually trying to give you artificially, right?
Right.
When in actuality, maybe if you start with exercising, you boost those endorphins that help with our pain tolerance. They're kind of the happy chemical, the runner's high. This is how you feel when you have those chemicals in your brain.
Right. I think what stops people, though, is they know they should exercise. We have that. I don't have time, right? So schedule's important. But I think we have to acknowledge there's a spiritual battle that happens when we decide to do things that are good for us. Immediately you have those negative voices that come into your life, and I, that you go to the gym and you haven't been in a long time and it looks like everybody else is in shape who's there. You look a little bit closer. They're not all, but then, and you start doing the work that you used to do. You were in high school or when you were in gymnastics, when you were in fourth grade or whatever it is. And you start having that negative monologue of, you're so this, or you're so that, or you're so out of shape, or this is such a waste of time, or I hate this, or blah, blah, blah. And we never really think about that in terms of, yes, part of that's self-esteem. Part of it is a spiritual attack, right? Mm-hmm. And so why not fight that battle and just to say, you know what? I'm not any of those things. Yes, this is hard in this moment, but I also know that it's worth it and it's valuable. And if I push through this moment of I hate this, then I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to say, hey, that wasn't so bad. And I know when I'm done with this, I'm going to feel better for having done it. So in Jesus' name, be silent. Go away from me. Leave me.
You're talking about the spiritual gift of perseverance.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is where you brought this up as essentially spiritual warfare, yet we don't look at it this way, whether it's food and bad eating habits, whether it's lack of motivation to exercise and take care of the body that God has given us that we're a steward of, or whether it's the responsibility of work. Like this is essentially spiritual warfare. Everything is sometimes going against us to do what is best, to do what is right, to be a dignified worker, to be a moral worker, to give the right amount of time in for what you are being paid.
Right. And so, and again, I'm not saying go and be a bodybuilder and it's all about vanity. And if you enjoy that, it's a good hobby for you, whatever. But to be at a point where you feel confident and healthy enough to go out, that if God said to you, hey, go approach that person and tell them I love them, you're feeling like you've got the energy to do it. You're feeling confident enough to go do that. You've already fought that battle of kind of coming against those voices of accusation, all those things. So you're in a position now to do the work God's called you to do.
And this is fundamental in the Christian moral life today, especially because there's so many challenges that I think that we are in the position to need to overcome. And I think conversations that we need to have and that self-esteem that comes with exercise, a better discipline, to be proud of yourself are so important. We're going to be talking about exercise and moving into food and prayer coming up here on Trending, so don't go away.
That's how you know to edit is when you get that tone. If you just drift off, just drift away. When you hear that, go, oh, bumper, Yeah.
Do you want to say anything more on exercise? Should we maybe get a little more specific? Like, this is what I do. This is what I do. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I just got to be careful not to, I mean, you're more of a exercise professional, but just not to, where to start, I think would be, like I think going for a walk is a great way to start, right? Like to just, and setting reasonable goals. So yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay,
sure.
I'll set it.
Yeah.
I'll set it and then we can bounce off.
Right, yeah.
Ready, set.
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie.
So for those who don't know, I am a Pilates trainer. I have my Stop Pilates certification. And so half of my time is spent training clients with hip injuries, spinal injuries, herniated discs, you name it. And it's also fun and really healthy form of exercise that protects your spine and your body in the long run. But I see people who are just hopping on the bandwagon of exercise, and I see people who have had the habit of exercise for many years now. And I have to say, I think one of the fundamental things to know about yourself, whether you're just starting your exercise journey or maybe you're trying to maintain it, no matter what stage of life you're in, is knowing how you do with exercise, your attitude. Maybe you're a person, I know I'm one of them, I cannot go to the gym. I would go, wouldn't last, wouldn't be consistent, I would get bored.
Right. Yeah, and I think understanding it is a discipline too, right? And that in a discipline, it's not every day you're not like, yeah, there's a lot of days you're like, I'm just going to put the next foot in front of this foot and I'm going to go. And to say, but I think that the mistake people make a lot of times too is they'll go on and they'll say, well, I'm not a gym person, I'm not this person, I'm not that person. And it so limits them.
Excuses.
Well, yeah. And so go and say, I'm going to commit to go for a month or whatever it is. And then when you go, just give it a chance. Like I said my whole life I wasn't a runner. Like I'm not a runner. Because when I was growing up, my legs grew first. And so I looked like Bambi when I tried to run. It was just terrible, Bambi on ice. And then so a couple years ago, I just thought, well, maybe I want to give this a try. And my wife runs all the time. I'll give it a try. And I started running, and I got to the point where I actually enjoyed running, right? But I had to work through I'm really bad at this to get good at it, right? And I think we forget that. Like, in order to be good at anything, you have to take the time to be bad at it.
Well, and for me, one of the things that's been difficult is I spent a period of time not dancing. And dance is just a part of who I am. And maybe you are someone who played soccer or baseball and you loved it. And it is a joy activity, truly.
Sure.
Maybe you should get back into it. But then here you are. And I know for me, dancing again, there are other people much younger who are far better now. And for me, it's difficult. I was a very, very good dancer. I danced with the Russian Ballet Company, the Kirov in Washington, D.C. Like, I had incredible opportunities. And so there can then be maybe some of that resentment that you didn't go on, or this frustration of I'm just not good enough. I'm not, quote unquote, in my mind, my best or the best. And so you want to stop. The reality is that that's a gift God's given you, right? And we're called to live that. And so for me, even if it's, gosh, the schedule's been intense. I've only made it into one dance class this week, but I'm doing other forms of exercise. You find ways to make it happen in a way that works for you. Maybe you need to take classes, right? Maybe you need to go and take a Pilates class.
Yeah.
San Diego, come take with me.
So I have a coworker, I call her my gym buddy, and she's, a senior citizen, and she just had a knee replacement, and I will see her at the gym at like 5:30 in the morning, and she's just doing the bike, and she's working out, and she's doing that, and so, but for her, she got to the point where she's like, I have to have this surgery, I want to get myself in shape, I want to kind of reclaim some areas of my life, and so she did. She paid the money, and she got a trainer, and she worked with that trainer for, so there was accountability, because she just paid all this money, right?
Right.
And now she's at the point where she's decided, well, I can handle this on my own, I know what to do, and so it's funny, we'll kind of keep each other accountable in the office. I'll walk in, I'll go, hey, didn't see you at the gym this morning. She's like, that's because you weren't there. I said, I know. I'll see you next week.
Well, and something that I think is important for me to remember, like maybe you have an injury, right? Maybe you have a knee issue or back issue, whatever it might be. And maybe part of that is because you have improper muscle memory, right? So the wrong muscles fire at the wrong times. And so maybe that's your quads and your hip flexors are gripping and you can't get into your abdominal connection and it's causing lower back issues. And I could go on and on, right? So you maybe need some specialized attention to work on that. And I think that that's where, again, it can become discouraging. I never feel my core and I still have back pain because I haven't gotten to the point where I've gotten the attention or worked through some of the challenges that I need to work through in order to live better, move better, feel better. And I think that's really important because I know a lot of people that spend a lot of time sitting around today, and that's caused a lot of bodily issues.
Right. Yeah. And again, if you look at kind of the mechanics of the human body, we're not good at standing still. We're not good at sitting. And so you need kind of have that core strength to keep moving, and it deteriorates. Like when you sit down, you're not using it. And so it falls apart. And so, yeah, it affects your total well-being. So Timmerie, this is kind of what you do. I am an amateur at best at the athletic stuff. If someone is saying right now, they're like, oh, this sounds really good, but I'm feeling kind of guilty, or how do I start, or I've done it before, blah, blah, blah. What would be your first tip to say, all right, you want to get back in, you want to make a small change to get a little bit healthier? What would you say for them to do?
Know whether or not you're a gym person, right? You can be a gym rat and get it done, or whether or not you need to do something like a class, or you need to be outdoors. I think that those are kind of the three main categories I usually see. So maybe you need to hike, right? Or kayak, canoe, whatever it might be. You need to be outside to feel inspired, and you need to be around nature more. That's one avenue. And maybe that starts with a walk, like you said, Chris.
Yeah.
Or maybe you are a gym person, but you need some guidance. So hire a personal trainer, or go with a friend who loves to go to the gym. Or I do have a friend who he always needs to go to the gym in order to build the habit with someone else. And so he's got someone side by side, and they're doing it together. And that's challenge them to build a habit because there's accountability there, like you said.
Right.
And then for classes, I would say if you want to go take a class, and I hear this all the time, say I want to take Pilates. People want to come in and take Pilates, but they feel so discouraged by all the other skinny people who do it perfectly. Everyone had to start somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And you start in a beginner class, and you stay consistent, you stick with it, and you set a time frame. I'm going to do this for 3 months. If it's not working for me, then I'm going to change my routine.
Right. And that's great. And the body needs that too. Like if you do the same thing over and over and over and over again, your body stops to react to it. So switching it up isn't a bad thing. Right.
And this is difficult to hear sometimes too, but say you have a bad habit, right, where your quads are always engaging, you can't get into your abs when you're exercising. Neuromuscularly, you have to have, I believe it's around 50,000 repetitions of that movement in a good way to rebuild the muscle memory. So that may sound like a lot, but if you're actively exercising, you're doing 1 sit-up, 2 sit-up over the period of a few months, you could build up to a certain point where you do have those repetitions to rebuild properly the muscles that you need to. So I just look at it, and exercise can feel so daunting, but at the same time, we've got to set ourselves up for success. So know what type of exercise person you are and give yourself a period of time. I remember one point, and this is kind of maybe the last tip I'll throw out there for exercise. If you know you're not good at exercising, I remember at one point I set up sticky notes because I had lost the habit, and I was in grad school and I didn't have a lot of time. I set up 31 sticky notes, and every time I exercised, I would take the sticky note and put it in a pile. And so at the end of the day, I would know, okay, how many days has it been? And I number them since I last exercised. And my rule was I needed to exercise at least 5 days a week for me personally to keep my mental sanity.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. And I want to make that connection to your spiritual reality, right? I think a lot of us feel like we're not living up to some sort of potential, right? And I know that comes against me at times. Whether that you're looking for a relationship and you're not in a relationship, or you really wanted to do X, Y, or Z, you're not doing it, or you sit down and you feel like you've got no energy, or whatever that is, getting out there and doing something to take care of you is going to put you in a better place to do those things you want to do, right? And so again, I hear this from people all the time. They're frustrated they can't meet someone. I'm not saying you have to get into perfect shape to meet someone, but knowing that you're taking care of yourself makes a big difference in your confidence. Right? It may not change the way you look at all, but it changes the way you feel.
It makes a difference in your confidence. It makes a difference in your adaptability, what you're willing to do and how you're willing to do it, because you've pushed yourself to get uncomfortable, right? And I think about Navy SEALs, the military. They do things that are incredibly uncomfortable. They have a high level of endurance because they need to be adaptable and approachable. They need to be able to persevere and push through things. Well, we may not be Navy SEALs or in the Marines, but we are each on a mission. And I think we forget that, which is why exercise is important. Discipline is important. We're going to start talking here about food as well.
Right. Absolutely. And again, we talk about fasting, denying yourself, learning to say no in small things, getting yourself up and saying, nope, I need to go for a walk now. It's not fasting, but it's a way that you can say to your body, I'm in charge of you, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't need to do all of these things that just give you comfort all the time. We can be a little bit uncomfortable, and you know what? We're going to feel better on the other side of it. And so again, it's a discipline that can help you kind of in mastery of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And, as you were saying that, one other thing did pop up. That is, a lot of studies have come out that today we live in a desk-oriented world, right? We're sitting down all the time. Your body was not made to sit as such. And we should really be getting up at least every 45 minutes or so and walking around for a few minutes. That is really going to save your hips, your back. A lot of people are getting hip replacements today because they spend so much time sitting down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it sounds so silly, but it used to be part of our reality. Right. This used to be what we did as people. We got up, we moved around. And again, I love all my modern conveniences. I really, really do. But there's something so cliche about, well, take the steps, right? Mm-hmm. But take the steps. Why not, right? There's something so cliche about, well, I ride my bike to work. Yeah, but most of us when we were kids loved riding our bikes. Like, we loved it. It was a thing that gave us joy, right? Well, why don't you deserve that joy anymore?
And I'm going to throw something out here because you went down this path. The issue with people needing to shower all the time. This is like a modern convenience, and I guess you can say I'm that dirty girl. I will go and exercise, and I will not take a shower after. I'll hang out with people. It's like, use some deodorant, or if you really need to, clean off real quickly. But I know a lot of people who are like, I can't exercise until I've showered right after, and it's going to throw off my whole day. Let's be a little more adaptable. You can't smell that bad. Come on.
No, I can smell that bad. I think it's funny, when I play basketball, my greatest talent is no one wants to guard me because of the grossness of guarding me.
Do you wear enough, stuff to take care of that body odor, deodorant?
There isn't enough out there unless I shower. No.
Really?
No. Sorry. This just got real, people.
Well, and I just admit it, I'm totally a dirty girl. I will go and not shower for a while. But I think that, being adaptable, so maybe you don't have smelly issues like Chris here, and you can go with maybe heading to work right after that exercise. We're going to be talking about food and prayer just a little bit on our last segment. Stay with us. Okay.
Smelly food. Super.
Smelly food.
Well, we just talked about how Chris needs to bathe often. Timmerie doesn't. So
you know what though? My boyfriend Gabe is like, he's better now, but he used to always, like, if we were to go for a hike in the middle of the day, he would not want to hike in the middle of the day, or the day would be over before. And he'd say that he smells. I'm like, yeah, you sweat a lot and it's disgusting, but you dry off and you smell fine. And to him, it's like, I'm dirty. Doesn't matter, like, I'm just dirty. I'm like, no, you were sweaty and now you're dry. You changed your clothes.
These are important
conversations. And I realize we're still on YouTube. Sorry.
No, it's true. But, it's one of those things that you, when you have a 13-year-old, you have to have those conversations, right?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, this is deodorant.
No one but Howard Stern is talking about these things.
Wow, we are the edgy Catholic radio hosts that you've been looking for. We made it, people. We made it.
You guys are probably enjoying this off-the-record conversation. That's Jimmy G, who's on the soundboard, helps engineer the whole show over here. You see his fingertips. And that's Matt over here in the room helping to make sure that you lovely people can see us right now. Okay, let's go ahead and hop into this next segment. So we have one segment left. Touch briefly on food and get into prayer.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, there's a quote from the Catechism. I think it's from Gaudium et Spes, but the whole of man's history has been the story of dire combat with the powers of evil stretching, so our Lord tells us, from the very dawn of history until the last day. Finding himself in the midst of this battlefield, man has to struggle to do what is right, and it is at great cost to himself and aided by God's grace that he succeeds in achieving his own inner integrity.
Are you going to read it?
I might read part of it.
If you read it, just really slow it down.
Oh, yeah.
Really
I was reading it too.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's go ahead and come on in. Do you have a starter for food? If not, I can.
I could just talk about
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
So, Timmerie, I have to admit it, I have an unhealthy relationship with pizza.
With pizza?
I love pizza. I've been a youth minister for 18 years, and I still love pizza. And it doesn't matter if it's good pizza or bad pizza, if it's Little Caesars pizza or like the boutique pizza. I will eat it all, and I will love every minute of it.
You know, I will be fully honest here. If I could have pizza, I was the same way. I have an autoimmune disease, and I have a lot of food allergies. And so there's a lot of food I can't eat, and pizza is one of the most difficult things. It is the thing that I crave. I can't have the dairy because I'm allergic to casein. I can't have the bread because I'm allergic to gluten. I can't have the butter. Like, I could have the sauce, and that would be it.
Wow.
So food is a tough topic.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's funny because pizza is one of those foods that it doesn't seem to take up any space in my body. Like I have one slice, I can have 5 slices. I'll just keep eating it. And then obviously afterwards you have that coma. But
your stomach's like...
I've had to tell it's funny, as I've grown up, I've had to say like, no, you can stop at 2 slices. That's okay.
Oh, I don't think I could stop. I think like that 2.5 at least for me, and I'm like half your size.
If I go to 3, it's going to be 7.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, I love pizza.
That level of self-control. Okay, what kind of pizza, though?
Pizza.
Like with topping.
Oh, whatever. I mean,
like
pepperoni, cheese, pineapple and bacon is an interesting. And I know that there's some people out there who are like, pineapple's an abomination. It can't go on pizza. You are not welcome in my home.
I am a pineapple and bacon lover.
Oh, man.
I'm all for it. I used to think that CPK had the best pineapple Canadian bacon pizza ever, if you haven't tried it.
CPK is California Pizza Kitchen.
Yes.
Right, which is all over the country.
Which he's like, I'm on my way there now.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think everybody's got that thing that they love, that they could just continue to eat, whether it's ice cream or it's pizza or it's mac and cheese or all those food things. And I know that there's a lot of people who... That relationship with food is kind of a difficult one.
It is a difficult one. I think, coming from the perspective of weight and the struggle a lot of people have with weight, the struggle people have with self-control, and also a lot of people are in my boat. Maybe not the same level, right? We all have different degrees, but where there are foods you can't have. And I think the issue is no matter which boat you're in, whatever camp it is, you want to replace what you desire with what you can get away with.
Replace what you desire with what you can get away with. All right, give me an example of that.
Food. Okay, say for example, so for me, I can't have, I'm not even going to list it. Basically, I can eat meat and vegetables, right? And I can have maybe a small serving of fruit each day. Last week, I've been struggling because I've had way too much dried fruit with 100% dark chocolate. It's not sugar per se, right?
Sure.
It's not artificial sugar and so forth, but it is natural sugar, but it's a higher potency. That's a lot of sugar. For me, my body starts to go downhill with how I react to that. It's not good if I have a high amount. So for me, I'm replacing, in some ways that desire for sugar and sweets with, it's, just 100% dark chocolate, no sugar, antioxidants, and then adding some fruit in. Well, guess what? I have a hard time falling asleep then because I'm having 100% dark chocolate at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I feel like what you're saying is that try to learn what makes you feel good and what makes you feel bad. And whether you have allergies or not, like there are certain foods that you may love, but afterwards you feel like you're in a fuzzy haze, right? I know for me, I was years, my nightly routine would be like a glass of milk and maybe 5 of those chewy granola bars. Because I've got kids and they're always accessible. And so I went through this period where I was doing this kind of high protein diet thing. And I was working out and I stopped having my 5 granola bars, which is like 500 calories each. It's a lot.
It's pure sugar.
Oh, absolutely. Delightful. But I realized I slept better and I felt better the next morning. And so what really nailed it for me was I stopped doing the high protein thing and went back to my routine. I woke up the next morning and I felt like I'd been like binge drinking or something. And I thought, wow, that's a revelation. I had no idea.
Well, you know what? I think that's a really good example. I think a lot of people actually don't eat that bad. There are just some really bad habits they have that might be daily that are throwing them off kilter, whether it's sleep, focus, a lot of these different things. We didn't even get to how people who exercise more and experience ADD, ADHD, how they're able to focus way better and have higher test scores. Same with sugar in their diet, right?
Right.
So I think that, with food, it's a matter of knowing what your body needs because there's so many diets out there, paleo, keto, lots of things that pump soy into your body that I don't agree with. We could get into that. We could go on and on. I personally, and full disclosure here, I basically eat keto because that's what works for my body. And
Right.
I have to replace all the carbs in my body to fuel it with fats. And it's worked really well for me, and especially with a tendency toward diabetes in my family.
Yeah, it's interesting. My family right now is super into the Bright Line, which is this new diet trend, and I guess it's the person who created it is she's like she takes neurology in and like how food affects the brain and the hormones and all those things, and it's really working for a number of people in my family, my brothers, my sisters, my parents, everybody. But I think what's interesting about all of it is whatever diet or method or thing you're doing, at some point you have to get down to this idea that food is fuel, right? Ultimately, food is fuel for the body. And we enjoy it. It's wonderful. It can bring great pleasure, right? Mm-hmm. All of these things are true, but ultimately it's fuel. And how are you fueling the machine?
This has always been my tip. Eat liturgically. For the most part, eat simply, right? And one of my friends says it's like dog food. He's like, I just need to eat, and I need to not think about the pleasure of it or whatever it is. I need to have the right food and just eat. But I always say, well, add the liturgy into it. Feast days, have some extra dessert, right? Sundays, celebrate, have a little bit more. And then during the week, especially, you're living a normal food life, not indulging in everything all the time. And Fridays, guess what? The bishops here in the United States call us to some form of fasting, and maybe that's just abstaining from meat. But I know I personally try really hard to find a long period of fasting 2 days during the week, and that changes our craving even for sugar.
Right, absolutely. It's interesting. Fasting is kind of a huge trend right now, and I've been fiddling around with that. If you haven't caught on to this, I tend to like to biohack things. Like I like to try things out and like to try different diets or different exercise routines or all of that good stuff. But it's interesting the way, when you look at the science behind fasting, like how it really truly can kind of help the body and the way it processes things, right? And so I've been doing this 12-hour intermittent fasting where I will stop eating at, well, whatever time I stop eating. I won't eat until, because it's, again, we've got a bunch of kids and a busy life.
Like none of your business.
Oh man, last night I came back from speaking in a parish and I sat down with my wife to have late dinner at like 10:30. And that ended with 2 slices of bread with peanut butter and raisins on them. And I was like, well, this is enough to go run a marathon, but hey, whatever. But that was around 11:30 and now it's 11:17 as we're recording this. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to eat coming up here. I get to eat pretty soon, right? It's kind of a reward. But what that does is it burns all of your ready, carbohydrate, all the ready like energy sources. And so that your body now is forced to start doing to break into the fat stores, right? It's forced us to. So in your body, you've got 2 different types of storage, right? You've got the readily available energy, and then you've got the energy that's been stored for later, right? Most of us never get to the stored for later because we're always constantly bringing in more and more food.
So we keep storing for later. And intermittent fasting kind of is teaching your body to break into the fat stores, right? To the reserves, as you will. So it's been interesting. I've kind of been enjoying it, and I have definitely found, I've been doing this for like a couple weeks, things like my watch is looser, which is okay. Well, that's pretty arbitrary, but that's it. And my pants feel a little looser. Don't need that belt necessarily, or do I?
Well, now I need it because everything's slipping around. But again, this is the church has taught us that fasting as a spiritual discipline, turns out it has all of these health benefits. And there's also been work where they've said that it can be preventative for some cancers as well.
Because it's dying off in the time when you're fasting. Your body's able to repair and work during that period. I want to shift gears just a little bit here. Taking fasting into prayer, we have just a couple minutes left here. We cannot talk about health and fitness if we don't talk about prayer. It's the medicine for the soul. It's the food for the soul. And, you could be, on board with exercise and you could be on board with eating well. But if you're not feeding your soul and dedicating that time to prayer, you're going to struggle in all the other areas of your life at times. You're not going to keep that consistency, and it's not going to transfer into how you interact with other people.
Oh, absolutely. I literally just had this conversation with the Lord last night where I've been really good about my exercise and my diet, and I have not been as good about my daily time of prayer. And so I was sitting in my office, and I felt like I was just fighting through mud to get any writing done. And I just was like, so frustrated. So I kept trying to double down my efforts. Like 3 hours go by. I haven't gotten my 1 page of writing I'm trying to get done. I just can't say what I know I'm supposed to say. And so I just stopped for a second. I felt the Lord kind of nudge me like, hey, maybe you should pray because it's about me, right? Whatever. And so I just spent 10 minutes in just spontaneous praise. Just to say the names of the Lord. I bless you, Lord Jesus. I praise you, King of Kings. I praise you, Lion of Judah, Lamb of God. Whatever name popped in my head, Holy Spirit, Paraclete, And just to let that time of prayer happen. And I tell you what, when I started, it was so painful. But by probably about 3 minutes in, all of a sudden you could just feel freedom come in, right? Because when you worship, we set the universe in order. He's worthy of worship. Nothing else is, right? And it changes everything. And how easy is it to fall out of the discipline of prayer?
And are we open to that prayer? Even you mentioned this story from the other night, and there was a battle, even within that context of, I have other things to do. It was hard to get going. And I think that with prayer, people say all the time, I don't know how to pray, or I don't understand the importance of it. You guys, I can't emphasize this enough. And I know a lot of people are going to go, oh, hold on. Go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. If you don't have one, that's your homework from Trending. You should have one. Basic Catholic theology, Catholic upbringing. Go and pick up a Catechism of the Catholic Church. That 4th section, it's the shortest section, is on prayer. It's the last number of paragraphs. It's the shortest section. But oh my gosh, it talks about teaching us how to pray and also telling us what prayer is, starting with exactly what you just said, that blessing, right? Prayer of blessing, blessed be you, God, right?
Right.
Adoring him. And then interceding for people you want to intercede for, offering that time up, and then petitioning God for what you need, and then going into thanking him for what he has, and then at the end of that, praising him for all of that, following that rubric. Our church is offering this opportunity to us.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that's the prayer of Jesus in the Our Father. Hey, we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you got any comments, we'd love for them to share with us on our social media pages. And as always, you can find the podcast on iHeartMedia or on Apple iTunes as well.
Sorry.
No problem.
All right, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good set. You ended the show.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay. All right, my kid's school called, so let me find out what
Okay.
that is real quick, just because